what I've tried to do in the notion of transpersonal history, which is my PhD for the University of London, and look at kind of philosophical approaches to history through the lens of transpersonal psychology. So in effect what I was asking is, how is the divine intelligence, or divine intelligences, operative in different epochs of human history? You know, like Sorokin argued, different cultures, different epochs embody different aspects of divine intelligence. I think that narrative hasn't been constructed yet. Historians haven't created that meta-narrative. They will do one day. You know, historians maybe 100, 200 years from now will look at the whole of world history as the unfolding of the universal soul, if you want. I mean, great historians like von Ranke tried to do it, but they didn't yet know the full story. I mean, 19th century Germany didn't have access to all the subtle nuances of world history that now we've got access to. And the thing is, it takes so long to master the study of world history that to also master the study of global philosophy is also a lifetime's quest. And to put them together, you know, it took someone like a Toynbee years to do the work for his study of history. But it is there, and I've shown in the work on transpersonal history how it could be done. I probably won't live long enough to do it, but that's the beauty of history. It's always, you know, there's so much of it. And hopefully it'll live long after I'm gone. These questions will resonate. But I do think that that question, how the divine intelligences operate through different time periods of human history, you know, is an important one to ask. And why different cultures embody different aspects of that. The Germanic culture, the Anglo-Saxon, you know, different Islamic or Arabic cultures and so on. I think eventually every culture, every nation, every ethnicity will realise we're all embodiments of some aspect of the divine intelligence embodied. And therefore we needn't fight. One day the Jews and the Arabs will sit down and share the Temple of the Mount together in peace. That's the symbolism of the opening of the Golden Gate. You know, I'm saying let's get a move on, brothers and sisters, and do it sooner rather than later. Because the danger is, of course, the kind of forces that want to emphasise distinction and separation and difference will succeed in fissuring the narrative, and it ends in a tragedy, a premature death, you know, which I think would be tragic. I think this planet's a fantastic soul school, as Keats said. Keep it going for please a few more, you know, hundreds of thousands of years, and then there'll be time for the great historians of the future to really understand what's been going on here. Okay, conclusion. Well, it's up to all of us. What are the conclusions? We can't. This is unfinishable. But we can think up new questions, right? So, first thing, who else to involve? You know, we've mentioned different sort of scholarly traditions. I think these are questions. It's a study of divine intelligence that can be looked at by historians, by economists. You know, there are people now talking about money was rooted in the sacred. First coins made in temples in the ancient world. There was an understanding money's sacred because it's about exchange, about relationship. Adam Smith knew, bless him, that it's a sacred thing. That's what he called the invisible hand. So what is that? In today's world of funny money and Eurozone collapse, would it not help to go back to a sacred or divine understanding of wealth and re-anchoring wealth in relationship and love? Theologians can get involved. You know, they talk about the divine acting in history, but, well, let's ask them to be specific and talk about that. Divine intelligence at work. How does it operate? Religious leaders and thinkers from every faith. I'm glad we've had Hindus, Jewish thinkers, Sufis and Druids and others represented here, and Christians and so on. Let's get the Zoroastrians and Baha'is and Buddhists and so on involved. Let's talk to mystics about their encounters with divine intelligence. I mean, I've wanted to go and film the great sages and saints of the planet. I've written a directory of saints and sages, but there's also living ones, and whilst they're still out there, we should be filming them, interviewing them, talking to them about their understanding of divine intelligence. Maybe these people are old, they're going to die. Let's record their stories before it's too late. Let's talk to psychologists and educationalists about spiritual intelligence. I think this should be factored into school curricula. Kids today are not rioting because of a shortage of access to technical information. That's forced down their throats. Mathematics, without even understanding what numbers are, they're forced to do hours and hours of mathematics a week, and they're never even told why or what numbers are. It's ridiculous. So there's a complete misemphasis in our school curricula in the Western world. We've emphasised technique, know how, not know why, which is ethics and metaphysics. We need to reorient our school systems away from the know-how. We know how enough. We don't know why. And that's morality, ethics, and what I call spiritual and moral intelligence. And that needs to be taught properly, with a comprehensive access. Stop dumbing down our kids. They're our kids, right? Give them the full panoply of human intelligence. Show them the full range of spiritual and scientific and philosophical teachings. Stop giving them sort of watered down diet based on scarcity of simplistic conclusions. Show them the full complexity. They're intelligent enough to work stuff out for themselves. They'll come up with the new inventions, the new discoveries that we need. This is why I advocate work with the gifted and talented in schools and also in universities. We need a gifted and talented program in higher education, both in this country and the States and elsewhere, so that the young students, the bright young students, don't get alienated by the kind of dead hand of academia, but get excited by ideas and work up new disciplines, new discoveries. And then our universities can become humming again with bright discoveries. Another question is to ask, what is goodness? Now, here's an interesting final etymological thought to end on. What is morality? What is goodness? Well, the word good in Anglo-Saxon is related to the word God. The two are completely etymologically connected. So much so that in Old English Anglo-Saxon, their pronunciation of the word for God was gut. Gut. And their pronunciation of the word for good was good. The pronunciation was reversed, right? And both of them go back to a root which is the same as our root, meaning to gather, gathering or togetherness. The actual root concept behind the concept of God is that which brings together, okay, or which gathers things. And if you think back to my definition or my etymological exposition of the meaning of intelligence, it's that which connects things. Well, God, the supreme intelligence, connects everything. And that's why God is by definition good, because when things are together, they are by definition good. So that's the kind of the moral dimension of intelligence, if you want. And to me, that is a beautiful thing. And yeah, I end really on that note. And divine beauty and divine morality and divine togetherness are what give me hope for the future. Okay, thank you. Any questions, discussion, feedback?
The whole concept of you have good versus evil, as you were talking about earlier. But if you really look at it, nothing's really evil. It has a purpose, it has a reason, and all. And if you're going to go with the concept of monotheism, then there can't be any evil. It all has to.
So God has to have created the devil.
Yeah.
And the devil's a secret intelligence agent for God all along.
Well, this is the thing to me, is this concept something that we as humans have devised, because things that are detrimental to us become bad, rather than being a vehicle for enlightenment and everything.
Right, so relatively speaking, there is suffering, isn't there? There is evil.
Yes, and I mean, it's one of the things that the more adversity you have in your life, the more you progress on a spiritual plane.
Suffering sometimes leads to great learning. It's a paradox, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. So to me, if there isn't actually what you would call good and evil, so much as there's an easy way and there's a hard way. You know,
it's a very complex issue. I mean, what's the question?
No, well,
or is this more of a statement?
Well, to me, it's more the fact that is there such a thing as evil?
It's one of the philosophical conundrums that I teach. You know, at A-level philosophy of religion, we struggle with this one. There's also the other question known as theodicy, which is, if God is good, why is there evil? You know, that's the other thing. And most theodicies argue that it's there to test us. The world could be perfectly good. We could all have, you know, an income of 100 grand a year, Rolls Royce, you know, perfect life, plenty for everybody. But it would be a very boring world. The most thinkers who struggle with this have said, no, you need a bit of suffering. You need, you know, occasionally people die young and there's suffering in order to make the happy ending even happier. You know, I mean, we've all been through dark times in our lives, and we know that when we come out of it, the joy is much better, you know. So that's one attempt to explain that evil is a kind of illusion that we do to ourselves just to make it an interesting story. And so maybe things like the Holocaust, things like the really big evils, the joke or tragedy is that the people that did this stuff thought they were good.
Yeah.
You know, they thought they were doing right. It's like in the American Civil War, you know, the Confederates thought they were in the right.
We were.
Their system was better.
You descend from it. We were.
Okay, fine. So you're speaking as a descendant of old Confederates, right?
Yeah.
And you know, every it's like a piece of string that's coiled into complex patterns and shapes, and it looks like different bits of string. But when you actually take one end, you see it's all one bit of string. You know, that's Maya for you. In the Hindu tradition, it's known as Maya, and they have this image of the rope trick. It's all one thing, but it looks like, you know, different things. And I think that's kind of evil. And I'm with Plato and Shankara that evil comes out of ignorance. It's to do with our limited perception. So Hitler wasn't clever enough to see that these Jews are incredible. He would have sat at the feet of rabbis instead of burning them to death. You know, the guy was an idiot. You know, there was so much wisdom in the Polish Jewish Kabbalists that should have been studying it. You know. So ignorance is what causes evil in my reading, and that's why, as an educator, I always say, you know, bring on the wisdom. That way, everybody's happier.
Yes, I can readily agree with what you're saying. It's just the fact that we do tend to polarize in our thought processes, good or evil.
Yeah.
And maybe getting rid of the polarization, we can then stop. Well, for example, apportioning blame rather than fixing the problems. Rather than saying this is an evil act, look at how you make it to your benefit rather than to your detriment.
I think it's you know, this is a huge area, and it's something the Centre for the Study of Divine Intelligence needs to look at because especially in the religious sphere, people bandy this word evil about, you know, the evil dictator, the evil other. It's always the other that's evil.
Yeah.
You know, and dear old Christ said, look what's in your own eye first before you grumble at the other guy's stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was a very subtle thinker who knew that perception is creative of reality, and we should be working together, as you say, in solving the problem. And if somebody's doing evil, they're suffering from a lack of knowledge, as I'd say. Ultimately, a lack of metaphysical knowledge. And the best thing you can do is just educate them. You know, work with them lovingly. You know. So anyway, look. Should we? Any other questions? Eva, do you want to comment?
Some remarks. You have a lot of intelligences, and I think some educators now promote for people to be more intelligent if they do art, if they do all kinds of things, music, as you said, in school. So I think, it should be educated in integral system, which is much better than now. I don't personally believe in devil, no.
Okay.
I think I'm more inclined towards one principle, even not in many God's principles, like you said, Hinduism, that are just phases of one principle, one God, if God exists. But what I wanted to challenge you, maybe, is with Dawkins, you know. Okay. He's a good chap. He knows a lot and he's clever. What he lacks is the spiritual, a little bit of spiritual dimension. But I think you two, or similar people, you more philosophical, religious, and such people as him, should reconcile. And this would be ideal if people like more atheist view, and you who are nearly totally sure that some divine principle exists, could come together.
Well, they're very welcome to come to next year's seminar, the Study of Divine Intelligence. You know, you put the word out among your atheist scientist friends, they're welcome to come.
But not to, to force them to believe, just to discuss.
No, absolutely. This is about dialogue, you know. Yeah. Thank you for that comment.
Right, my name is Martha, and I'm just going to explain something of what I've been learning about through my life. I've just been asked to do this off the cuff, so it may not be all that coherent, but I'll do my best to make it intelligible. What I thought I'd like to talk about is what has influenced me, which is the study of the Greek mysteries, because that was what has influenced all the people that came along, that actually is part of the foundation of our Western culture. So I'm thinking about the mysteries, and I'm thinking of them as the story of the soul, which is a thing that we don't really understand what it is. There were two kinds of mysteries, the lesser mysteries and the greater mysteries. And the lesser mysteries have to do with the relationship of the soul with the body, and the greater mysteries have to do with the relationship of the soul with the spirit. So in the lesser mysteries, that's told by the myth of Persephone, the daughter of Demeter. And Persephone is snatched away and taken down to hell, and then she's restored back to her true home by the agency of her mother coming hunting for her, and the god Mercury, or Hermes, which is intellect or mind, the messenger god. So the thing is that this mystery could possibly be seen as representing the incarnation of the soul into body. And on the descent, as they called it, into body, the soul is so tossed about by the energies, the natural energies, and everything connected with the body that enter into it, that it drinks of the river of forgetfulness, and it forgets her real home. And so the course of our life on earth is, our challenge is to be able to find our way back to our real home. And in order to do that, the soul has two areas of energy. It has an irrational energy and a rational energy. So the soul has a spiritual essence where all the knowledge of what it really is stored in the soul memory, so to speak. And then this is divided or emerges in body in a divided way, because it isn't really divided in soul, as rational and irrational energies. Now the irrational energies are those that help the soul to inform the body and to keep the body alive and safe and healthy and all those things. And the rational energies are those that help the soul to know. So in the tradition that I've come from, the rational energies have 5 aspects to them. The 5 Gnostic faculties, they're called, the 5 faculties of knowing, which are the senses, which is the way the body knows things, the instincts, which is the unification of the senses, the estimation or opinionative faculty, which employs logic about things that are material, and then the reason, which is dialectical energy, and dialectic means to read across, which is how the soul moves from the material to the immaterial or spiritual realms consciously. And then finally that's culminated by the intuitive vision or intuition, which is the indivisible unification of the consciousness, the knowing, in the way that the soul knows the thing that is known as though it were one with it. So it's unitive, this intuitive vision. So the other four have to do with the soul in a divided state, soul and body, but the intuition unifies everything so that knower and known are one. So the objects of knowing are separate from the knower in the first four, and in the intuition they're united. Now the soul is also tripartite. It has body, it has heart, mind and will. And the heart has the mind and the will of the heart to it, and the will has the mind and heart of the will, and the mind has the heart and mind of the mind. So that is ninefold. And that's why we need the 9 muses, because they inspire each of the elements of our knowing, the whole soul. So besides the Gnostic faculties, which the Western world has developed, the reasoning part of things, actually the mystical faculty, which uses the energies of the irrational, the heart side, combined with the energies of the rational, the mind side, by the use of the will, it has a higher unitive function. It unites the heart, mind and will into one single faculty, which moves towards the one, which is the divine considered as the emanating power, and the good, which is the divine considered as the collecting up together, returning power. And once the soul can manage to move through those 5 Gnostic faculties, it's like Jacob's ladder in a way, it can then realize its origins and its own real home, and be at home as soul. So the lesser mysteries had to do with the resurrection of the body to the soul. But now, when we've arrived at the intuitive vision of reality, and we can recover the knowledge of our real home and our consciousness, then we move towards the greater mysteries, which have to do with knowing things in their causes, which is another way of looking at the word intellect, which is in and tele, because in the mysteries that tele was the goal, the final goal, to keep the target in sight. So in tele means knowing things in their ends, the reason why things exist, to understand the cause and the final destiny of everything. And for the human soul, that is to do with knowing the divine intelligence in a way that one is at one with it. So in order to do this, the mystical faculty has 7 aspects. And the mystical faculty, which is the energy of the whole soul, which is the soul as being all sight, all vision, is it's like 7 directions in which the whole soul can look. 7 directions of divinity. So there would be the transcendent of the divinity, the immanence of the divinity, which you were interested in, the immanence, and then the transcendental immanence. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 is the unmanifested one, and then the manifested one, and then the unmanifested and at the same time manifested one, finally culminating in the infinite one, so that in the greater mysteries you touch the doors to the infinite. So in the course of doing this, we have what the technical term for it was the apokatastasis of the human soul, which is the resurrection of the body to the soul and the soul to spirit in the individual. But the really big challenge is that we need to do this as a service to the cosmos, because when the human race can do this in a tiniest way collectively, it would have a huge impact on the mundane realm about us. Because there is also the apokatastasis of the universal soul, which then means that you would be serving in the act of creation and enabling the whole of the physical universe to be shot through with light. And that actually comes to the point where you realize that light is the embodiment of spirit. And so basically, I think that's about all I want to say.
You've summed up beautifully the kind of quintessence of Greek philosophy there, and how it relates to divine intelligence, like a path to access it.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And of course that was the thing with the Platonic tradition, particularly within the Greek, because there's much more besides just the Platonic tradition.
Sure.
But the school at Athens and the school at Alexandria were in a position where they were beginning, the school in Alexandria especially, were beginning to be persecuted by the monotheistic and dogmatic Christian religion, when they were just forming their theology and just getting established. So what the Neoplatonists did was they actually ended up putting into words what had been reserved as an esoteric achromatic teaching, which just means that it's mouth to ear, as the old Pythagoreans had. But then later on it became necessary to put some of this teaching into words. But the idea is, if you can lift yourself to theoretic virtue and to the paradigmatic virtue using intuitive vision and entering nous, pure intelligence, then you could contact the realized minds of those who had gone before, and they would help you in your work on earth. So it's a most amazing tradition. I'm quite delighted with it. And of course you find overlaps and interconnections with lots of others. Abaras and Jesus and some of the Druids were thought to have connected up with Pythagoras. And so these esoteric teachings all fed one another because there's a unity to it at the basis, which Heraclitus touched on when he coined the phrase, the universal order, the order of the universe.
Right.
I better button
So
up.
another question, just any other questions from the floor? I mean, I've got one for you, which is, you just mentioned there that part of these teachings was that when you reached a certain level of illumination on this plane, you could then contact the departed teachers who would also help further your studies. Which text is that actually in? Do you know? Do you remember?
I'd have to say that was in...
Is that in a commentary by Thomas Taylor, or is it in an original text?
I think it's in one of the commentaries, but I think it's also a realized experience.
It's very sad. It's part of transversal history, the concept that as historians we can also access the spiritual realm and then use that data. Rudolf Steiner talks about it in his work. But I just wondered if any of the ancient Greeks, because they invented history, why didn't the people doing Neoplatonism get together with the people doing history and say we can do spiritual history?
Well, I think that might have been part of the esoteric and interior teaching, really. And there's no reason to think that that doesn't actually happen in the supermundane realm.
Quite often when something is readily known and accepted, it's not actually put into the records because everybody knew it. Yes. I know from, like with the Native Americans and all like this, there's so much of their belief system that to them, everybody should know this. It's so readily apparent that they don't actually talk about it when they're explaining things. And it's when you go back and say, well, why? And they go, you don't know? And it could be something like this, that, because the Greeks very much, their science was a science of observation, of deductive reasoning, and such as this, rather than experimentation. So to me, the fact that the spiritual aspect of their knowledge would be so commonplace they wouldn't have a need to actually put it down.
And they also had the thought that if you actually had to resort to writing, it's because you had a deficient memory, which I think is very good.
Sure. Any questions from Eva or Christine? Any comments?
I just didn't quite get you. Did you go through these mystery schools or you just read about them?
Now you're asking. Well, I'm trying to walk that path, let's put it that way.
Oh, I see.
Can I ask a question? Because what happened to these pagan mysteries of the ancient Greeks, as you said, was the monotheists took over. Hypatia was killed by a mob of so-called Christian monks, you know. Where do you see the Jesus story fitting into the greater or lesser mysteries? Which of the mysteries was he enacting? And do you think he was an initiate?
Oh, definitely.
And what was he doing consciously?
Well, I think he was bringing the ancient mystery tradition, which, if you look at one of its origins in Egypt, with Isis and Osiris, and the resurrection there.
Yeah.
And of course, the Dionysian mysteries too in Greece. What Jesus, the Christed one, did, in my view, was he actually lived the mysteries. In other words, his resurrection was an actual physical resurrection, whereas the others might have been just a myth, a story of what was possible for the human being. And it could be, I don't know this for sure, I'm just speculating, that Jesus, the Christed one, was the one who actualized it first in history for humanity. So he's very worthy of respect, veneration.
And was that the lesser mystery or the greater mystery?
Well, the lesser mystery was to
both?
have the freedom of the mundane world and the realm of the soul. But he also, I believe, in order to have the glory body, must have been an initiate of the greater mysteries as well.
Right. But then why did his followers become so violent? That's the thing that perplexes me, because these ancient Greeks were peace-loving.
Yes.
You know, the Pythagoreans. Why on earth did that notion of let's kill the others, where did that come from?
I think it's because the Christians, when they were beginning, and more power to them, welcomed slaves and uneducated people as well into their groups.
Right.
And I think it's because of the ignorance of the human being. They didn't know about the range of the faculties that needed to be developed. And so they would take everything at the estimative level mostly, and take the teachings literally, and, you know, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. Look what happened as a result of that teaching in the Bible.
Okay, it's just lack of education.
It's just lack of education.
Yeah, that fits with my estimation.
But there is also a willful aspect to ignorance. Ignorance is not innocence.
There can be an ignorance of the will, a moral blindness.
Yeah, like my way's best and you've got to do it, which happened in Christianity quite a lot.
So there wasn't a devil in the ancient Greek cosmology. I mean, where does that ignorance of the will come from? Why are some people evil?
The problem of the evil is that it's only less than good. So that if you are limited in your understanding, you do evil acts because of your ignorance. And so in order to overcome evil acts of the past life, you need to live super karmically. You need to live in a way that will transcend what you've done before and convert it into soul powers. So one way of seeing evil from the Greek point of view would be as the devil as a personification of the collective human ignorance and in its application of evil acts.
I think the devil is a creation of the church, because I think in pagan tradition it was the goat, the snake and the dragon.
Yes.
And they all had their place.
Yes.
Right? So by the church trying to reform people, pagans, they created the devil.
They did, that's
So,
right.
which means
the
they
actual
suppressed it.
image of the devil was definitely created by them.
Yes.
And they took it from the daimonis. And the daimonis are spiritual powers in the different spiritual powers coming down through the emanations of the worlds under each of the mundane gods. And these daimonis became demons in the Christian, and they took the image with the tail and from some of the pagan practices and distorted it. And so you have your devil. Thank you, that's right.
With the mysteries of the ancient Greeks, would they have had, like you find in a lot of your Middle East, the idea of balance?
Balance.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because they looked at the virtues as you could have an excess or a defect of them. And what you needed was the balance. And in the geometry of that, the acute angle represented the defect. And the other one, the bigger angle, represented the excess. And what we wanted was the right angle, which led straight to the above, the straightest path to the highest. Yes, the balance is very important. Justice or balance. There were the 4 cardinal virtues, weren't there, that the Christians stole from the Greeks. And justice was one of them. Prudence, justice, fortitude, and wisdom. And they're to do with the heart, mind, will, and the unification of that. Wisdom was the unification of it all. Prudence was the virtue of the mind, fortitude of the will, and temperance of the heart element. But then you took the different levels through the ethical, political, cathartic, but all had to be in balance. That's a very good point, an important point that I left out. Thank you.
What would you say the Greek, if the ancient Greeks were here at this seminar, what would you say their term for divine intelligence would be? Would it be the logos? And if so, can you tell us what that principle is or was for them?
Logos is the implications of order. And what order is actually quite a mystery, because the Greeks would say that order was the expression of the one into multiplicity. And in the evolution of our planet, we are at this, the culmination of the era of multiplicity in some people's view. And our challenge now is to move towards the integrality. So to integrate everything of positive, that's positive, in order to begin the restoration of the whole. We use the term noesis and nous. Nous being the divine intellect in the sense of intelli, which is at one with the goal of everything, so that all knowing that's possible is there. And the emanation of this is the wisdom. So that wisdom is truth in action. That was the thing about the Greeks. They had a way with words. I think, anyway.
I believe that each one of us has the power within us to access, for the point of this discussion, what is invisible to us. And I think that each one of us has a particular gift that we can contribute to the whole in that aspect. And I think that in terms of education, in terms of spirituality, that should be brought to schools. Each one of us finds that particular gift that we bring. In my own case, I grew up surrounded in a society that was basically Catholic, but also totally accepted the fact that there are visitations from creatures from other aspects of life, and even religious manifestations, and this was part of everyday life. Okay, it wasn't until I got to about 15 I'm thinking this is kind of strange, you know. But anyway, so I feel that because that was coming from a very, very ancient place, really, in terms of that particular society, that in a sense that my genes were honed through that, and therefore I have a gift which has manifested itself in many, many ways. And with drugs and without drugs, I've experienced other worlds and other creatures. And you're talking about demons. In these other worlds, these creatures exist, but there's no judgmental, it's not bad or good, it's simply being, and each aspect, each myriads of creatures, and they each have a part to play in the dance of the universe. Yeah. So I'm thinking about what you said earlier about the cosmic library, and on the basis that I kind of subscribe to the, I can't remember the name of the Greek philosopher who said all life is stories. I'll tell you a story. I'll tell you one of my experiences. I was at Glastonbury Festival when my mother died, and it was slightly stressful for me because I'd only found out one morning, and we were supposed to come back the following morning, and it was decided it would have been kind of crazy for me to try and get away from the festival and get back to Glasgow, so I would travel back normally as we planned on Monday morning. So the people I were with, we sat around and had a little moment for my mother, and then it was decided that we should go to the field and wait for the band to play. One of my friends, who is a Reiki master, asked me if I'd like to have some Reiki. I'd only smoked a little bit of marijuana. I wasn't under any drugs influences, but I kind of call it a kind of acute awareness of my mother moving on was with me. Yeah. So my friend's given me Reiki, and I could just feel myself taking off completely. I could feel this energy. And what happened was all these faces started appearing, and they were like my family. I could recognise faces, and then the faces started changing, and I had this awareness of the fact that I was visiting my DNA stream, these faces and these characters coming towards me. Eventually they were rushing past me until I got to the point, and it seemed kind of a long journey this, but it got faster and faster and faster and accelerated, and all these faces coming past me. And then the faces changed, became non-human, but not disturbing in any way, just, wow, that's really interesting. What is that about? That was my whole feeling all the way through it. And then all of a sudden it came to a stop. This rush came to a stop. And I'm confronted with this creature who is staring me straight in the face and almost saying to me, how did you get here? And he was very large, had kind of pale green skin, very, very round, wrinkly eyes, big, big blue eyes, and he had a thatch, almost of blonde hair sticking out the top of his head. And what he was doing was putting almost like, it seemed to me like a DVD case or a CD case into a shelf. Right? And this was his business, and that's what he was attending to. And it was almost like he was preparing or filing my mother's moving on in some shape or form, and I'd somehow attached myself to this. And as soon as he said to me, what are you doing here? I just went all the way back. Yeah. Then there's a lot more to the story, but that's possibly the main one. And I kind of thought about afterwards. I thought about the librarian angels and what their function was. I'd never really subscribed to that side of life and visited that side of life until I had this experience. Yeah. So my mother used to call her a witch because she had told predictive. She predicted things, and she'd have dreams, predictive dreams, and it was very. This was normal for us. And so when I came back, my mother was actually sitting at the bottom of a field in this position. We used to go up to Loch Lomond quite a lot, and she'd find this little space under a tree, and she'd sit there and kind of meditate on her own, and she was there. And I kind of said, hey Mum, come and join us here, you know? And it was the first time I'd ever experienced another being inside my body, right? She was actually inside me, and I was having a conversation with her. And there were all these kids at the bottom of the field, and all on their mobile phones, and she just lost the plot with technology as she got older. And she's saying to me, what are they all doing down there? What is that they're doing? That's disturbing me. What are they doing? And I'm trying to explain it to her. And then a boy came and tripped over my foot, and she's saying, oh, that's really rude. And I was saying, that's my friend's son. I've told you about him. And so we had this dialogue of everything that was going on round about. And eventually I said to her, look, Mum, because my daughter said she's holding on until you and my brother come back. And I said, look, Mum, please just go. Please just, we're fine. We're all fine. Please just go. And so she did. She did, and it was a really amazing sensation, calmness and feeling of that, of her just moving on. And I kind of just, and the friend who'd given me Reiki said they all watched me. I was totally somewhere, and he'd stopped giving me the Reiki, instantly because of the energy that was coming from me. And I decided I wanted a bit of quiet after that, and someone was walking back to her tent, and we passed a beer tent, the workers' beer tent, which was really, really quiet. It was the time of day it was. And we decided to go and have a little drink there. And they had one plant, a flowering bush, at the end of the bar. And I kind of looked at it, there's no other plants in the place, and I looked at this plant. And my mother had planted the same bush in her front garden like 2 weeks before. And I kind of made this connection, sat down, made a phone call, and my mother had died 5 minutes before at the point when I looked at this bush. So that's one of my experiences, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I've had many more journeying experiences like that, in terms of meeting different creatures and different universes. And I do think, I'm really not sure what the divine intelligence is in terms of my own experiences, but I do know that there is so much out there that is part of us, and we are part of it. And it's about navigating that, essentially, and joining with it. That's how I see it.
Well, thank you very much, Christine, for sharing that very moving story. And am I right in thinking that the story you described when you were having that experience with the Reiki,
Yes.
and then you saw your mother come and sit in the field, that was all whilst you were under the Reiki, is it?
No, my friend said he stopped giving me Reiki. I had just taken off so much, the energy coming from me. He
so then you went and sat in the field and you felt it come into you?
Yes.
And then you went in the tent and saw the plant?
Yeah.
So she'd actually died around that time?
At the moment, yeah.
But you didn't know that? You knew she was ill?
Yes, I knew she was dying. I knew she was dying, yes.
Right. It's very interesting. And did you ever talk to your mother about
that side of life?
About her beliefs in divine intelligence? What do you think she would say if she were here?
Well, I at one point in my life, quite condensed period of my life, I was having very disturbing predictive dreams about what was going on in the world and different aspects of life, and I had dreams about bombs going off in different places, which they did, and so I realised that I had never really had a discussion with my mother about her predictive dreams, because it was something we'd grown up with and part of our lives so much. So I settled myself down for a really deep conversation with my mother about this side of life, and she was very, very pure, devout Catholic. And I said to her, "Mum, how did you feel as a person when you had these dreams?" And she turned around to me and she said, "I don't think about that. That's God's business." Yeah, and she meant it. She totally meant it. She was the conduit. She was, that pureness of faith. But I also think that came from the acceptance, along with the pagan aspects of life in that part of the world. I think that was part of it too.
Tell us just finally also about the place, the Hebrides, because your mother was from the Outer Hebrides.
Yes.
What's their significance, do you think? Not too far from this castle.
No, they're certainly not. I don't know. To me, it's like going to Ireland, parts of Ireland as well. I call it going through the glimmering curtain, because there is another dynamic that comes into being in terms of being there. There's this sort of like, it is a glimmering curtain that edges between that our reality and other aspects of reality are slightly fudgy, and they're more open in a sense because of the tradition of dealing with that side of life. That's what we call it.
And there's a legend, isn't there, about priestesses of Bridget coming to the Hebrides?
And the name
What's that?
Hebrides are named after the Brigidian nuns who apparently fled to the Hebrides when Christianity hit Ireland. And they were very strong. Bridget herself was an incredibly powerful woman, and the nuns in fact held sway over quite a lot of Ireland for many, a couple of centuries, I think. Actually.
This would be pre-Christian.
Yeah, pre-Christian, yes. And when Christianity hit Ireland, although Christianity embraced Bridget, and the story goes that the reason they embraced Bridget was because she was far too strong for them to fight her. But a lot of the nuns fled to the Outer Hebrides, and that's why they're called Hebrides, the Isles of Brid. So, quite like the idea of being descended from pagan nuns.
It's been a wonderful day, okay, and thank everyone for coming. and those that weren't able to be here in person, you know, some of whom have actually sent a submission, others will no doubt in the future. I'm hoping this will become an annual event right, here at the Castle of the Muses. I think it's an appropriate venue. It's a beautiful spot here in Scotland, not far from Iona and the Isles. And there is, like Christine said, there is this sense of a glimmering curtain. You know, we're on the edge of Europe, we're on the edge of Britain, and I think mankind is on the edge of a choice, really. We're at a moral crossroads on the planet. We can either choose to go down the path of serious inquiry into ultimate truth and living up responsibly to our duties on this planet as custodians, stewards of the earth, but not the lords of the earth, the servants of truth, those that worship the divine, that want to live in harmony you know, with the divine beauty that we know is all around us. You can't live in this part of the world and not know that. The landscape, the loch, the islands, you know, the mountains, the forests. And so we can either do that, or we can sort of befuddle ourselves and lose our sense of virtue and peace and so on. So it's a crossroads, and I hope this day today has been a little marker on the road for all of us who've been here individually, but also for those that can watch this, you know, at a distance. And if people do want to get in touch, and if people have insights or ideas they'd like to share, either in writing or they can send us, you know, their own talk or their own interviews. This project of the study of divine intelligence is just beginning here. You know, I think it's very important that thinkers, academics, historians, scientists, chemists, cosmologists, you know, anyone out there that's interested in this topic, please get in touch with the Castle of the Muses. Come next year to the conference. Send your submissions. And, you know, let's try and get some serious goodness and intelligence on this planet activated, rather than kind of letting the planet fall into the hands of what I call dark intelligence, or ignorance, you know, which works through subterfuge, secrecy, lies, spin, you know, etc., etc. I think it's time for mankind to stop being afraid. You know, we have to live up to our Promethean inheritance. You know, Prometheus didn't bring us fire just to let it die out. And with Athena's help, and the Muses, and Christ and Buddha and all the other great saints, Muhammad, and, you know, these are the forces of light that we've invoked here today and that have come indirectly. Okay, and let's just with courage stand up against ignorance, fear, doubt, and so on. That's, as President Roosevelt said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. So the antidote to that is perfect love. Perfect love casts out fear, as Christ said. So let's work on that together. And we'll close just with a couple of minutes of silent meditation again. And thank you so much for coming.